Hello, Opening Pathways viewers. It's Tom LeNoble, and it's great to be with you again. I'm excited today. I have Marc Yaggi with me today. He's the Chief Executive Officer of Waterkeeper Alliance, and we're going to learn about Waterkeeper Alliance and a lot more about Marc. Marc, welcome to Opening Pathways.
Thank you, Tom. Thank you so much for having me. I'm excited to be here today.
I'm excited you're here. I know the viewers are going to love it. Let's start at the beginning. Tell us about Waterkeepers Alliance and what sparked your idea to start it.
Well, I can't claim to have started it. I've been here a long time, but I won't say I started it. It's we're an international NGO that unites more than 300 locally based clean water advocacy organizations, and we focus citizen action, science, and law on issues that affect our waterways, from pollution to climate change. Now, the whole thing really started. We were incorporated in 1999, but we trace our roots back to the 1960s on New York's Hudson River, where a group of blue-collar recreational and commercial fishermen banded together to take a dying river back from industry polluters and restore its health for the people. And those fishermen went out and they patrolled the river, they identified pollution problems, and they forced polluters to clean up their mess. And because of the work that they did, today the Hudson River, while still facing challenges, is cleaner than it's been in more than 60 years. It was had very little life on it in the 1960s. Today it's teeming with life. And what their work did, it's considered to be an icon of international icon of ecosystem revitalization. And the way that they took a dying river and restored its health really inspired all these other groups to start doing this work. And now we're made up of more than 300 of these organizations modeled after what was done in the Hudson in 45 countries. And together they're patrolling a little over 6 million square miles of watershed for more than 2 billion people. And the through line hasn't changed though in the past 60 years. It's about ordinary people deciding that their water is worth fighting for,
So,
and I would just say those, I think those early fishermen understood something that it, I've been now spending my career on, is that clean water isn't just an environmental issue. It's the foundation of everything we care about. It's our health, our communities, our economy, our future. And that's what still fascinates me about water, because I get to go and visit with all of these groups, and I find water is one of the only things that every single human being on this earth shares. It's doesn't matter where you live, what language you speak, what you believe in, your life is shaped by water. And the thing is that we all share that dependence on water, but we don't all share the same risk.
yeah, I'm so inspired by this. I really am because I think we often take water, among many other things in life, for granted. And I just the expansiveness of what you're doing for something that is so precious to us. What was it that started you to have so much interest in water? You've been working on it now for many years with Waterkeeper Alliance. How was it that you got inspired to be involved with water?
That's a great question, Tom. And I trace it back to my childhood. I think when maybe a lot of people do that, but I grew up on the Susquehanna River in Pennsylvania. I grew up in a pretty rural area, and as a child, I felt like I could go out my back door and walk for what seemed like miles. I mean, your sense of perception's a little bit skewed when you're a child, but we did have a lot of open space. And I had as a boy, I had a golden retriever named Ben, and we used to swim and fish in lakes, streams, ponds, rivers, day after day, throughout the summer, after school. It was freedom and happiness for me. And I thought that every other child was experiencing the same thing, and boy, was I wrong. I got a little older, I learned a few things, I traveled a little bit, and started realizing that no, not every kid could go down to their local waterway, jump in and have a swim without fear of getting sick. They couldn't get a glass of water and drink it without fear of poisoning themselves. They couldn't catch a fish and feed it to their family without fear that they were going to poison their family with mercury PCBs. Those were things I never had to deal with, never gave it a second thought. And that was always an injustice to me, and it's always stuck with me since my childhood.
Who was it that believed in Mark before Mark believed in himself?
Wow, I feel blessed that I've been shaped by a lot of really wonderful people, and I think, I have to start with my family, and that they shared with me a love of the outdoors, and they gave me that freedom to be out day in and day out. This was back in the days that you might recall when we used to go outside and we'd come home for dinner whenever it was dinner time. You weren't sort of in on screens inside all day. We all went out and explored, and I had that freedom to explore those rivers and just go take a fishing rod and take my dog and go jump in any pothole I could find, and all over the community. And that's where I really developed that affinity for water and the values of stewardship. But just through the course of my career too, just a lot of amazing people. I think one that's always sticks out to me is a guy named Terry Backer. He was a hero in my life and a mentor. He passed away a little over 10 years ago. And Terry was a former lobsterman, and he was fed up with the raw sewage that was being dumped into Long Island Sound. And so he became Long Island Sound keeper after he learned about those fishermen on the Hudson. And he started using the law to force the communities along Long Island Sound to clean up their sewage waste. And then ultimately, he became a Connecticut state legislator as well as being a founder of my organization, Waterkeeper Alliance. But Terry was a real character. He had a really gruff exterior, as you could picture a classic former lobsterman. He was that. He had a gruff exterior, he had a heart of gold inside. I know his everyday attire was a pair of jeans, a t-shirt, a jean jacket, an earring, and a Greek fisherman's cap. And you learn from him to be bold and never give up. And he was just such an inspiration to me. I still think about him all the time.
I love this. You reminded me of two people. One, my father, who was just a lover of nature. In fact, my dad would often say he would rather be in the woods with animals than with people, with human beings. And he was amazing at what he knew from doing that. He had no fear of it. And the other is I have a really close friend on Maui who has two boys, one 5 and one 7. And the 7-year-old, since he was very young, wants to fish every day. It's like a thing. Every day he wants to know when they're going fishing. And so Chris takes him fishing almost every day. Every now and then there's like, we can't go today, but for the most part. So I have a feeling we may have somebody coming up behind you that will be there for Waterkeeper Alliance with this little kid. So tell me
Yeah,
this.
he sounds like
What,
a protector.
yeah, he does, doesn't he? What personal values have guided you from the start?
You know, I'm gonna go back to what you alluded to in the beginning was that every part of our life is affected by water. And you think about it, a waterway is the lifeblood of a community. To me, it's like an artery that carries the community's health, its economy, its past, its future. It gives the community everything. And so we have a lot of people who have been brought up to be consumers, right? They look at the river and say, what do you have for me? It's a take, take, take society in a lot of ways, but we see people shift to being a protector, a guardian, someone that asks the opposite question. It's like, okay, this water provides us with everything. What does it need from me? How can I give back? And I think that value is, I think, something that transcends environmental protection. It's really should be something that's attributable to everyone who listens to this podcast who's a business leader, whether they're dealing with their teams or their company or their community. Are they an extractor, or are they tending it and making it better and trying to get back? And that's been something that's always been core to me, is to wanting to give back and make things better than how I found them.
Love this, love this. Tell me something. We'd love to know about a risky decision that you had to make that paid off and what gave you the courage to act on it.
Well, I think that a lot of this work is about taking risks. It is. And it's not always what people think, because I think the real risk is in not acting. Because, the moment you feel safe is the moment you become vulnerable. It's in this kind of work, complacency is what loses, right? If you don't show up, the polluters win every single time. They win by default. There's no fight required. They just win. And and I think about the risk that those fishermen took back in the 1960s, that these commercial fishermen that had no money, no power, no political connections, but they decided to take on some of the largest corporations in American history, and they risked everything, their livelihood, their standing in their own town. And but to them, I think the bigger risk was not acting and losing their livelihood and losing this resource that fed them. So to me, it's the big risk is not acting. And so that kind of drives us, I think. And I'm trying to think of a risk that we've taken that paid off. I mean, I think anytime we bring some of these lawsuits against big polluters, it's a huge risk because they're deep pocketed, they've got lots of resources, they're going to tie you up in court for a decade. And they fight back hard. And so, I'd be lying if I'd say that wasn't comfortable, or that was comfortable. It's an uncomfortable situation to be in, when you're taking on and I'm not going to name anyone in particular, but that's something where, but when we win, it pays off.
Yeah, yeah. I love this. I'm so moved by what you're doing. We all see shows and movies. I mean, one comes to mind, of course, is Aaron Brockovich of fighting for people that have had horrible things happen we've done to the environment. Do you think that we're moving in the right direction? I know you are, but do you think as um, a society we're moving in the right direction and becoming more aware of what the dangers are, or are we still kind of got our head in the sand and clueless to what's going on?
I think that humanity has the ingenuity and the ability to solve these crises. The water crisis, the climate crisis, it's just a matter of the political will. And I think there's also a gap between awareness and action. I think the awareness is growing. It's hard to miss it. It's all over the place of these different droughts that communities are having, flooding that's happening in other communities. What's going to happen with El Nino coming up this year. And but I think we're going in a pretty bad direction right now. And I was going to say this: we're nonpartisan. We've held power accountable our entire history. It doesn't matter who's in office. We pressured the Navy under Clinton. We sued the Bush administration for mercury issues. We've took on Obama to court for coal ash. We've challenged the Biden administration on drilling leases, and wetland permitting, and both parties. It doesn't matter. That's what we do. And so when I tell you that this is one of the hardest stretches I've lived through, it's not coming from a partisan angle. I'm saying it as someone who's watching protections that we fought for decades get unwound faster than I've ever seen. And there have been some mornings where, you have to be an optimist to do this work, but there's definitely some mornings where I wake up and wonder, like, if it can be stripped away this fast, like, what did we actually build?
Yeah.
And so sit there with that and think about it. But I do get pulled back by, I keep on talking about these fishermen on the Hudson, but they've had such an impression on me, is that it took them more than 50 years to clean up the Hudson, right? And that's through every kind of administration you can imagine. And the progress was never a straight line. It never came from something where Washington handed it to them. It came from local leaders on their own water and them working and being dedicated and persevering every single day. And so you can roll back a regulation, you can roll back all the regulations, but you can't roll back hundreds of communities of people that refuse to quit. And they're going to persist and they're going to get past whatever administration is doing horrible things. And we're going to keep showing up.
Wow. What fear still visits you even after all you've accomplished?
Um, I think, I mean, I guess it goes back to what you were just talking, we were just talking about in sort of, taking on those entrenched interests. That's a real, people with real money, real expensive lawyers fighting back so hard. That's a difficult situation to find yourself in. But that that fear doesn't ever go away, and it shouldn't. It's not supposed to. It keeps you alive, I guess. And you just decide it matters less than what you're protecting. And the alternative is to be standing there on the bank and just watching it all happen and doing nothing. And I don't think any of these 300 plus clean water advocates that I work with would ever want to choose that over the fear. And so we just stay in the fight.
Wow. Has there been a time where saying no to someone required more courage than a yes?
Yeah, I definitely. I mean, there are, you know, we found there are a lot of times where there are so many rollbacks happening that we just have to stay disciplined and focus on what is in our lane. And that's not easy because you want to try to push back on every single thing that you see falling around you. Um, and that's related to, I think, the answer to your question is that there are times when people might come to us and they want us to work on something that's not in our strategic plan, and they have a lot of money they'll put into it. And you know it's an issue you care about, but you have to stay true to what you're supposed to be trying to achieve towards your mission and your strategic plan. And that's always been really challenging because you get some sparkly idea dangled in front of you and the money to put behind it, and to have that discipline to say, no, this is our lane, this is what we're committed to doing, and we don't have the ability to work on that. We've got to focus on what we're good
Mhm.
at, and what we're focused on. And so I think, you know, that happens from time to time, and it's just something I've had to learn over time to you got to say no. And it's not
You know,
easy.
I think about the work you're doing, and I'm struck by how much patience you have in the presence of urgency for at times for things that are going on. Um, how do you choose between those two things? Tell us about that, about being patient for all legislation to go through or lawsuits at the same time of knowing, or at least I know it, that what we're not doing in that period of time just becomes that more urgent.
Yeah, it's really challenging. One of my other mentors was someone who worked in New York Harbor, and his team, he's no longer there anymore, but his team would always talk about how when a big project would show up at their door, and they would start talking about it, and they would take it to him and talk to him about it, and they'd ask him what he thought was going to what it was going to take, and he'd look at it and he'd say, "We're gonna have to throw about a decade at that." And you know, it's these things take so much time. I remember in 2006, 2007, we were working on trying to get mercury out of smokestacks because the mercury comes out, it drops down into the waterways. That's what poisons the fish. It jeopardizes a pregnant woman from being able to eat fish. You know, when you get mercury in her blood. And that issue we've been working on, and they're still trying to roll back those mercury rules today. It's 20 some years later. And it just feels like sometimes you want a hamster wheel with some of these things. You take a few steps forward and a few steps back, and it's really challenging to. And I don't always find myself to be a patient person. I like to get things done. I want to see things accomplished. And so trying to balance that of knowing that legislation can take really long time, and litigation can take a really long time. A lot of times we try to avoid having to go to court. I mean, nobody wants to go to court. It takes time and resources. If we can find a solution that works for the polluter and works for us, then that's a better win-win. I also think that that's where one piece of our model I like a lot is that I think change happens the most quickest at the local level. And you know, it can take years and years at the federal level, but you can make a lot of change locally that that would take much longer federally. And ultimately, it bubbles up over time. And say to people, you know, in New York, we banned plastic bags. This is a simple example. This is a state level example, but we banned plastic bags, right? Well, that was during Governor Cuomo's tenure. Governor Cuomo didn't wake up one day and say, hey, these plastic bags are bad. We should ban them. What happened was one community said, these things are clogging our waterways. They're single use. They're not good for the environment. They're not good for our community, and they organized until they got banned in their town. And then the next town over said, "Hey, that's a good idea," and they did it. And the next town, next town, next town, bubbled up to the state banned them. And you know that's where you get the changes at the local level.
Wow, I remember that fight here over plastic bags, and then there was all the negotiation of who could keep them and who couldn't, depending on your size. And I remember thinking to myself, that didn't really change, the size of the company didn't change the issue. Or here we have a way to recycle batteries really easily. And like when I'm in Hawaii, on Maui, there that doesn't exist. It's mind-boggling to me how we drag our feet on some of these things that seem so obvious, that the harm they're doing. Wow. So tell me this, Mark, what impact are you most proud of? Not publicly or professionally, but personally.
Well, I'm trying to change. I'm trying to divorce the personal from the professional. They're so tightly wound here together, you know. Um, Personally, it's that deals with how all my family and all the things that are personal to me. But I think it translates professionally too. One of the things that's the biggest a challenge and something I'm really proud of is that I run a network that I have no authority over. You know, there's not one of these water keepers, those 300 plus groups that work for me. They're independent NGOs, and the entire thing runs on trust. And so I extend that trust to people who know their water better than I ever will, and they extend it back to me. Now, sometimes that trust breaks, and you have to work hard to earn it back. But I'm proud of the trusting relationships that I've built over these years with these groups, and I think it's that structure that really makes it work because these amazing groups aren't, they're not branch offices taking orders from headquarters, right? I'm not here in New York telling someone in Seattle or Nairobi how to protect their waterway. They're the local leaders and the local experts, and each of them are rooted in their own community, and we're united by a shared purpose. And so, trying to keep that network moving in the same direction under shared purpose and based on trust is incredibly challenging, but incredibly rewarding too
Mhm. Mm.
for
Tell
me.
me this, what boundary has become essential to your sustainability?
Mhm. I've worked really hard over the years to try to have some balance. And I think I've been very aggressive at my calendar and scheduling things and really being mindful of when things need to be done and setting it up so that they're all going to be done on time and balancing enough time that I can be there for my family and enjoy the personal pursuits that I need to have to be fulfilled outside of this work. And so creating those types of boundaries have been important that, I'm generally always available, but I block off time where I'm generally, unless it's an emergency, I don't want to be bothered and trying to work sometimes less on the weekends when I can and just setting up time that I'm going to be present. I think I try and fail all the time to be better at meditating and things so that I can learn to be more in the present. And I think that that's a lifelong struggle, but something that I think helps me set some boundaries and realize that I need to be present for everything that I do, including my own personal life.
Through this experience, with Waterkeeper Alliance, what have you learned about trust?
Well, I've learned that relationships are based on trust, right? And there are a lot of different core pieces of it, dealing with, the integrity and the intention and the capability and the execution and the results that you show. And those are all the sort of foundations of a trusting relationship, and those can break in an instant over a misunderstanding, a miscommunication. And when you're working with 300 groups in 45 countries with different languages, different religions, different cultures, it's very easy to make a mistake and have to then spend a lot of time trying to earn that trust back. But I also understand that when you do have trust, it is the power of it. It's incredible.
Mm. What does legacy look like to you at this stage of life?
Hmm. Um, well, my end game is a world where clean water is a given and not a privilege. Right? It's where every person, no matter their zip code, where they're born, that they can turn on the tap get a glass of water that's clean. They can catch a fish and eat it. They can jump in that waterway like I talked about on a hot day and not fear getting sick and just enjoy it. And that's really what I'm trying to achieve. It's a drinkable, swimmable fish or fishable water everywhere for everyone. And it's not something that's luxury for the lucky. You know, your zip code, your geography, your income shouldn't dictate whether you have clean water or not. And so when we talked about this at the start, that we all share the same dependence on water, but we don't all share the same risk. And I want to close that gap. And, making it so that the safety or the experiences that I got to have when I was a kid are something that isn't a matter of luck. I was just lucky, and it shouldn't be a matter of luck. And I think that also to me, you know, that that childhood experience really formed the foundation for me, but things got a lot more personal when I had kids. And today I've got an 18-year-old son and a 15-year-old daughter, and they mean everything to me. So for legacy, like I don't want to look back in 20 years and wish that there was more I could have done to give them a safe and healthy future. And I don't want them to look back at your dad with contempt and bewilderment and say, how could you have left us these dying rivers and the contaminated oceans and denuded forests and sterile fields? Because I firmly believe that we owe it to future generations to give them a better world than what we inherited. And so that's a part, it's not my legacy, it's just a legacy I want to be part of.
Yeah, yeah. I see you as doing service, the literally service work for humanity. How has your definition of service changed over time?
Um, I think it was, when I went to law school, I know I was wanted to pursue the issues around water in law. And but when you're in law school, you're thinking about, oh, I got to get a job and I need to build my career, and you're thinking about yourself and your career and the future that you need to build. And I think it was when I started working on, um, actually, my second job out of law school was to work for Hudson Riverkeeper, that first group on the Hudson where the fishermen started back in the 60s. My job was to work on protecting the New York City drinking water supply, which is a 2,000 square mile watershed that serves water to 9 million people. And I learned early on in that it was a lot more than just about water. It was about power. And there was going to be someone making a decision of what was going to get protected and what was going to get sacrificed. And when, in terms of what's going to get sacrificed, it's usually for those who have the least power to fight back. And that was something that stuck with me early on. And it's kind of one of those things where you see it and you can't unsee it. And that's been an issue that's been important to me for a long time because it's when you're citing a sewage plant or a anything with a discharge pipe or a power plant, these public officials and polluters aren't going to places where they've got lobbyists and lawyers and they can fight for that 10 years I talked about. They're looking for places where people are holding down 2 to 3 jobs, the tax base is thin, and they aren't told what's in their water. And those are the people that have to carry the burden of our environmental sins. And that's one of the gaps we want to close, one of the equity things that we really need to fix, because that it goes back to what I said about your zip code, your income shouldn't determine whether you have clean water or not.
Ooh, what does renewal look like for Mark beyond a day off or just resting?
Spending time in water. I just got to spend an extended period of time in the Mediterranean Sea, and it was like 85, 87 degrees Fahrenheit. It was insanely warm, which there are not a lot of fish there anymore. It's overfished, and I think the water's too warm for a lot of fish to live there. But the renewal of just being in water, it does it for me. It just reinvigorates me. Anytime I need to get a break, it's to go down to the water and jump in. That's my renewal.
I love it. What question do you hope people will ask you more often?
How can I get involved? You know, and I think everybody has, I'm borrowing from, maybe is it Simon Sinek? I think everybody's got their why. Everybody has a why, even if they've never named it. What's their why? What's the place that's special to you? There's parts of this. There's one thing about water is, it's affects every part of our life. You know that you're sitting in this computer you're using and everything around you, the clothes you're wearing wouldn't be available without water. But we also have this spiritual side, this where it nurtures your soul. And studies show that being in and around water makes us happier, makes us healthier. It brings us peace. And I think I want people to understand their why and ask how they get involved. Because if they start to realize why water matters to them, then they can realize they don't have to save the whole planet. They just need to make an impact close to home on that
Yes.
waterway that runs through their community that provides them with so many opportunities.
So, what wisdom have you earned that you could have never learned in a book?
I think that in almost 30 years of this work, I think I found that the people who change things aren't always the ones with the most power and the most money. They're the ones who refuse to stay quiet. And as Dr. King said, the our lives begin to end the day we become silent about things that matter. And our waterways matter, our future matters, and we can't be silent about it. And I get so inspired by seeing these local community advocates take on those entrenched interests and win. Whether it's there's a former shrimper in Texas named Diane who took on a multinational plastics giant because they were dumping billions of pellets into her bay and her waterway. She went out there with volunteers, became citizen scientists, and they walked that waterway for years, collecting evidence, collecting data, and ended up taking the multinational to court, and they won the largest Clean Water Act settlement in history from citizen suits. They forced that company to spend $50 million on environmentally beneficial projects in their local community that was impacted. And they were able to get that company to agree to a zero discharge standard of plastics going forward. And so it's those things I've learned is it goes back to that the people that are, they didn't have the most money, they didn't have the most power, but they refused to give up and they used the tools that they could to get the result that they needed.
Wow. So, if that very young boy that was fishing and swimming were listening to this podcast right now, what would you tell him?
Enjoy it because life gets a lot harder. But remember those experiences you're having on that waterway and to know that not everyone's having that same experience and to cherish it
If your
because
story could leave our listeners with one invitation today, what would it be?
can I make it a multi-pronged invitation?
You can. It's your
So
invitation.
learn about your water, where it comes from, what's in it. I mean, here in the United States, our water utilities are required to put out a report every year about what's in their water and what they tested for. Take that first step of getting to know your water, but then come visit us at waterkeeper.org, learn about water issues, but also find your local waterkeeper and get engaged with them. They need people to volunteer, to get involved in cleanups, to learn, go out and test water, to show up at public hearings because politicians pay attention when the room is full. So we need to get your voice out there. And so, and like I said before, you can make the biggest impact at the local level. So get engaged locally. That's where you're going to have it make a difference. And you're going to go home. It's a difference when working at the where I am now, I don't have a specific watershed I'm personally protecting, and it was a real transition for me because I'd spent that time protecting New York City watershed. I was living in that watershed, and so I go home at night thinking about how I was so happy I knew that wetland is still being protected, that it was right there. But that's what people can do. They can go home at night and know that they played a role in protecting the waterway that goes through their community, that serves as that artery, as that lifeblood of their community.
Amazing. Mark, Chief Executive Officer of Waterkeeper Alliance, thank you for being on Opening Pathways today. And how can we reach you?
You can find us at waterkeeper.org, or you can email me. My email is myaggi@waterkeeper.org.
Thank
Reach
you
out
very
anytime.
much. Thank you for being here.
Thank you so much. I really appreciate you bringing this critical issue to light, and more people
Yes.
need to talk about water.
And viewers, this is Tom LeNoble. Thank you for joining me on Opening Pathways today. I hope as you watch this episode, you also think about the next glass of water you drink and what it means to you as you recount the work that Mark has been doing in the world and know that we all have a responsibility to do the same. I'll see you next time.